Well, it's been a while. I've tried to avoid getting bogged down in the neuroses of the new Trump era. The world continues to go completely stark raving mad. But I couldn't let this one pass. I've done a video on Douglas Murray before, and by rights I should probably move on to someone else. But this comment and this reaction that he gave to the ongoing problem in Gaza and the new dynamic introduced by the lunatic idea by Donald Trump to expel everybody from Gaza and develop into some sort of real estate project. Most of the world, of course, recognizes that this is complete lunacy. From someone who's so utterly inconsistent and flip-floppish that it's hardly worth paying attention to, apart from the obvious misery that such a move would imply. But I was surprised, frankly, and I've watched the decline of quite a few prominent intellectuals over the last, or not intellectuals, prominent commentators over the last while. Ayaan Hirsi Ali suddenly becomes a Christian. TYT suddenly starts swinging to the right. Michael Schellenberger finds God. Joe Rogan loses his bloody mind and backs Trump. The list goes on. Now, I have watched as Douglas Murray here continues to, as he has done, I suppose consistently, but certainly since October 2023, shilling for a right-wing Israeli government. And I make no apologies for criticizing the Israeli government. None. I have been to Israel, I've visited Israel, I know Israelis. I have no issues with Israel as a state. I have said that before. I have timestamped that after the October attack nearly 2 years ago. Year and a half ago. But I found Douglas Murray here increasingly in some bizarre echo chamber. I suspect that he's on Sky News just way too often. He's in an echo chamber. I watched him briefly on the Anderson, the former PM of Australia, John Anderson's podcast. And John Anderson has hosted some rather unsavoury characters, in my view. Certainly people with highly questionable motives, at the very least. But Douglas continues to surprise me, because I did, at a point in the past, have a lot of time for Douglas's contribution to various debates, discussions. I've seen him on various panel debates with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, as it happens, debating the question of Islam, and I'm absolutely with him that Islam, although I can see some light between his position and mine. Islam as a set of ideas, as a social and cultural construct, is problematic. There are definitely issues with it. But that's not the same as saying that people can't come from another part of the world in a time of crisis or to seek opportunities. Douglas, along with quite a few other people, have reverted into a kind of cultural trench when it comes to this. And I'm not uninformed or unaware of the potential for there to be problems with regard to some people who might harbour unsavoury views about how life should be led and about the West, whatever that means. But this particular intervention here follows on from, obviously, Donald Trump's proposal, shall we say, to evacuate the Palestinians from Gaza a population approaching somewhere in the region of 2 million people, and to relocate them in different parts of the Middle East. And I was struck because after that was made, an Israeli minister, cabinet minister, suggested that countries that had advocated for the Palestinians in the midst of an absolutely unambiguously brutal onslaught by the IDF on Gazan territory, and the deaths of conservatively 40,000+ people, including a lot of women and children. This Israeli minister suggested that perhaps countries like Norway, Spain and Ireland should take some of these 2 million people. Now, of course, Ireland, like any Western European country, is having its issues at the moment with immigration. So that comment from an Israeli foreign minister or an Israeli minister, cabinet minister, was certainly calculated to capitalise on that. Not least now since Israel no longer has an embassy in Dublin because they copped out. They couldn't take the criticism, perfectly legitimate criticism of government policy in their country, tried to reframe it as anti-Semitism, and thereby close down their embassy. So we can put his comment, his contention that countries like Ireland should take these Palestinian citizens or Palestinian people and simply move them to Ireland. Now, there's some things to unpack there, but let's just take a listen to Douglas's rationalization here, because he makes a similar point, as we'll see.
Should be said with some clarity, which is you lost. You lost. Hamas, you lost. Gazans, you lost. You voted in a terrorist group, and you seem, as far as we can tell, to approve of the motives of that terrorist group and its ambitions. If there are any moderate Gazans out there, this would be a great time to speak up. But from the video footage we see and from the testimony of hostages, not least female hostages who've returned from Gaza back to Israel in the last year, seems that the population of Gaza is quite as radicalized as the people who rule them.
Just a point there, and it's a point I actually raised in the previous video that I did about Douglas Murray. What the hell did you expect would happen? Yes, the people of Gaza were radicalized, not least because of consistent deprivation and consistent bombing and attacks by the Israeli government. Yes, they were foolish to vote in Hamas into power. And for moderate Gazans at the moment, it would not be a good time to speak up, because the consequences would probably be death if they did. Hamas are assholes of a grade A order. We already know this. Now, for Douglas Murray to feign surprise at the fact that people of Gaza appear to be still radicalized, after 40,000+ deaths and the complete rubble that they're living in, you're surprised that this is the case? You think that they're not able to recruit into the ranks of Hamas? Douglas Murray should know this. He knows what happens. He reported on precisely this issue in Northern Ireland. State overreach on the part of the British government and the British Army in Derry in 1972 resulted in a complete surge in support for the Provisional IRA. And that's with the death of 14 people. The IDF have just killed over 40,000. Conservatively, some estimates put it higher, closer to 60. Relative to the number of people who died in October of 2023 in Israel, of somewhere in the region of 1,300 to 1,500 Israeli civilians, That puts the kill ratio at 40 to 1. Who wouldn't be radicalized by that? What did you think was going to happen? So yes, Douglas, they are radicalized again.
So it's not obvious that after starting this war and losing it, the people of Gaza should simply get yet more international funding to do the same thing all over again. That was, until this week, about the only plan on the table, that American taxpayers, European taxpayers, British taxpayers, Irish taxpayers, of course, everyone around the region in the Middle East should pour money into Gaza to give the Gazans another opportunity to make sure they steal money, like all the leadership of Hamas did, who all became billionaires, of course, continue working with their underground tunnel networks, and then launch at some point in the coming years yet another war on Israel. That was about the only plan on the table until this week. And Trump has now completely opened this question up. He's completely changed the political landscape on this by saying that actually the Gaza is not livable. I've seen that with my own eyes. Thanks to the house-to-house fighting, it's basically a wreck, and the population who are from there would do much better to be encouraged to move elsewhere, as President Trump said. There are lots of countries that have expressed enormous support for the Palestinians of Gaza, and I see no reason why they shouldn't be encouraged to take them in.
So Gaza is now unlivable. Why? Because the Israelis destroyed it. So because the Israelis destroy it, that means that the rest of the world and countries around the Middle East have a responsibility to take the Gaza citizens in. How, in what world does that make sense? He's seen it with his own eyes because of hand-to-hand fighting. Who do you think they were fighting with? Who do you think was doing the fighting? Who was doing the destroying? Yeah, Hamas. Assholes. Putting their weapons systems in schools and mosques and hospitals. Of course. It has really obliged them by destroying the territory. Levelling it. Reducing it to rubble. So for that now, the rest of the world has to pick up the tab and facilitate the evacuation of Gaza, of its Palestinian population. Oh, and now we're going to hear about how other countries around the world should be obliged to take them in. Well, let's hear that.
Pakistan, I'm sure, could do with the highly radicalised population of Gaza going their way. The government of Ireland, that's been so vituperative about the Israelis in this war and has said that they are the greatest friends of the Palestinians, they, I'm sure, could do with a large influx of Gazans to Ireland.
Okay. This, to me, is the crux of this video. I had always assumed that Douglas Murray was educated, knowledgeable, informed. It appears he is not, because Douglas Murray appears to be utterly bereft of any sense of the history of these islands. There are two reasons why Ireland cannot and will not take in Palestinians expelled on the orders of Donald Trump. Number one, to do so would be to be complicit in a clear crime against humanity. And unlike other countries we could mention, Ireland has no experience or facility in undertaking crimes against humanity. But second, and this is where Douglas Murray's lack of knowledge of history comes to the fore. One that we could forgive the Israeli cabinet minister for not having. Because why would he? It's from another part of the world. But Douglas Murray has no such excuse. In 1652, the English government passed the Settlement of Ireland Act. And in that act, it authorised Cromwell's government and his forces to expel the Irish population east of the Shannon River into the west of the Shannon River, to hell or to Connacht. And the expulsion of the native Irish population to territory that was less arable, less fertile, impoverished an entire population, is well remembered among Irish people. We are taught it in school. We know about this. I'm not surprised that English people don't, because the English education system didn't even admit to the famine occurring in Britain, in the United Kingdom, in the 1840s. Simply not discussed. English people just don't know that within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland in the 1840s, 1 million people starved to death. That was 200 years after the resettlement of Ireland. No self-respecting Irish person is going to be complicit in a to hell or to Connacht 2.0. An updated version. To hell or to Connacht becomes to hell or to Ireland for the Palestinians. I am, frankly, deeply disappointed that Douglas Murray has allowed himself to become a shill for this right-wing government. And he's not without his valid points, and I would acknowledge them. Yes, Hamas are a cancer on the Palestinian people. The Palestinians have been poorly led by their own leaders and by Arab governments throughout history. They could have had their two-state solution years ago if Arafat had accepted the deal and if Olmert's deal of 2008 had been accepted. Yes, the Israelis did remove all settlers from the Gaza Strip. And yes, Hamas are toxic. But the idea that you're going to solve this problem by precipitating a massive crime against humanity, by the forced displacement of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to whatever country, is nonsense. And Douglas Murray should be ashamed of himself for even thinking about this, for even trying to defend this. He's hanging his hat on this utterance of Donald Trump, one of the most mercurial, unpredictable people. I think Douglas Murray has just tarnished his legacy irreparably here by throwing his weight in behind this. Vituperative? It is not vituperative to highlight crimes against humanity perpetrated by the Israeli Defense Forces on the people of Gaza. What I'm more concerned about is the manifest cowardice of many other countries who have simply shut up about it. Starmer in the UK, Schulz in Germany, Macron in France. The leadership of Europe has remained silent on this, to their shame. Ireland has not. And Ireland will be judged more kindly by history than Douglas Murray or the political leadership that seems to be so supine in the face of Netanyahu's bullying. But the manifest ignorance of suggesting that countries that have voiced their opposition to Israel's treatment of the Gaza people somehow obligates them to participate in a crime against humanity, and for people in Ireland to commit to undertaking a second mass displacement of people and allow their country to become a venue for what is ethnic cleansing, shows staggering ignorance on the part of Douglas Murray. And I'm very disappointed. I think Douglas Murray is otherwise an important commentator, but what he has become now is nothing less than a propagandist for Israel.